Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S6 6048 Space Explorers, Chapter 1. I stuffed my homework in my backpack and ran out the door. I was in a hurry to get to school. Today was a solar system day. Our homework was to write a report on one of the 9 planets. My report was on Mars, my favorite. I just knew my report would be the best. But that wasn't the only reason I was in a hurry. I had finally finished putting together Rocco the Rockhound robot, a remote control rover I made from a kit. I'd been working on him for weeks. There must have been a zillion parts. Now Rocco was ready to roll, and I was taking him to school for show and tell. When I got to class, Miss Frizzle was hanging up a chart of the solar system. Our solar system. The solar system is the sun and all the bodies that orbit around it. The 9 planets, the moons, asteroids, chunks of rock, and comets, the balls of ice and dust. The sun is the center of our solar system. The sun supplies all the light and almost all the heat for everything else in the solar system. No planet, moon, comet, or asteroid has any light of its own. One by one, the rest of the class came in. They crowded around to look at Rocco. "Hey, cool toy, Carlos," said Dorothy Ann. Most of the time, we call her DA. Rocco was modeled after Sojourner, the first robot rover to explore Mars. But Rocco looked more like a dog than a robot. As he rolled along on his wheels, his head turned from side to side, and his tail wagged. He even made a little beeping noise as he moved. It sounded something like yip, yip, yip. But the best thing about Rocco was his rock pocket, a secret compartment in his back. When I pushed the button on the remote, the rock pocket opened and out popped the built-in mechanical arm with a scoop at the end. The scoop could be dragged along the ground to pick up rocks and soil. Another button on the remote turned the arm and dumped the stuff into the rock pocket. It was the neatest way to find rocks for my collection. "Rocco isn't a toy," I said. "He's a robot rock collector." Pushed the button to open Rocco's rock pocket. Inside were some rocks and reddish clay soil that Rocco had scooped up on the way to school. "The soil looks a lot like the soil on Mars," I said. Ralphie laughed. "No way," he said. "Mars soil is green just like Martian." "You've got rocks in your head, Ralphie," I said. "The stuff about little green men on Mars is pure science fiction. Mars is actually called the Red Planet because of the rust in its soil." "Well, I heard that there may have been life on Mars long ago," Phoebe said. "Maybe they had a little green man then." "You guys don't know anything," Keisha said. "Nothing could live on Mars. It's too cold." Miss Frizzle put an end to the argument. "I think the best way to settle this is with our own eyes. Everyone to the bus. Mars is only 49 million miles away. We can be there before lunch." I tucked Rocco under my arm and followed the Freeze to the parking lot. The bus looked a little different than usual. For one thing, there were a couple of huge rockets sticking out the back. If I had known we were going to outer space today, I would have brought a bigger lunch, Arnold said as we climbed aboard. "Buckle your seat belts," the Fritz called. A regular spaceship would take at least 9 months to get to Mars, but this is the magic school bus. We'll be there in a jiffy. She fired the rocket, and we blasted off. Our planets travel around the sun. Its planet travels around the sun or revolves in its own path or orbit. The farther the planet is from the sun, the longer it takes to revolve. Earth is the third planet from the sun. It takes 365 days to make one revolution. Spin, blah blah blah, it's equal to 1 year. All planets spin. The planets spin like tops as they revolve around the sun. Some planets spin very fast, some spin very slowly. Earth spins around or rotates once every 24 hours. This is what makes day and night. Chapter 2. The great power of the rockets gave the bus enough speed to break away from Earth's gravity. We zoomed through the atmosphere into dark, airless space. Earth is protector. The atmosphere is a thin layer of air that surrounds and protects Earth. The atmosphere is held down by Earth's gravity. Without gravity, the air we breathe would fly off into space. A word from Dorothy Ann. Gravity is a force within a star or planet that pulls objects toward its center. Once we were going fast enough, the fridge turned off the rocket. Right away, strange things started to happen. I had been holding Rocco on my lap, but I let go of him for a second and he floated up to the ceiling. At the same time, Ralph yelled, "Hey, I can't fly!" He had unbuckled his seatbelt and was floating above us like Peter Pan. That's because we are weightless while we stay in orbit around Earth. Miss Frizzle explained, with the engines off, we are no longer being pulled toward the floor of the bus by gravity, so our bodies can float around. I've got to try it, Keisha said. She unbuckled the seatbelt and moved too quickly, spinning around in a somersault. Yeah, we are totally spaced out. Soon we were all bumping into one another as we tumbled around inside the space bus. We had to hold on to seat backs to steady ourselves. Arnold was floating upside down near a window. "Look at Earth," he said. "It's so beautiful." From up here, we all floated over to see. Earth was a blue and brownish green sphere surrounded by swirling white clouds. Home sweet home, the perfect planet. Earth is the perfect distance from the sun for life. It's not too hot, not too cold. It has water and gases such as oxygen that living things need. It also had an atmosphere to protect it from harmful rays from the sun. All of this makes Earth a perfect place for animals and plants to live and grow. Earth is one of the 4 rocky planets, along with Mercury, Venus, and Mars, the fridge said. But as you can see, most of the surface is covered with water. Some people think a better name for a planet would be ocean. There was a lot of water covering Earth. I couldn't believe how small the planet looked from space. "Hey, there's the moon," Wanda called, "or at least half of it. The whole moon is there," Wanda said, "but we only see the part that is lit up by the sun's light. The orb that orbits the moon orbits Earth, just as Earth orbits the sun. One orbit takes 29 and a half days. The moon seems to change shape because we see different amounts of its sunlit side as it travels around the Earth. I remember that the moon is covered with rocks." "Miss Frizzle," I said, "could we stop here? I always wanted some moon rocks for my collection. Sure thing, Carlos." Miss Frizzle fired some engines to change our direction. We slowed down as we came near the bright side of the moon. It was covered with deep pits and craters that looked like a huge bowl. We landed in one of the wide craters with a thud. "Put on your space helmets, everyone." Miss Frizzle instructed us, showing us how to strap on our breathing equipment. You won't be able to breathe without the oxygen tanks. There's not a breath of air out there. Since sound cannot travel without air, we all had radios in our heads so we could talk with one another. I stepped carefully off the bus onto the dusty ground. Wow, I could hardly believe it. I feel like Neil Armstrong, I said. One small step for Carlos. Moonwalk. Neil Armstrong became the first person to set foot on the moon. He was one of three men in the Apollo the second crew. Millions and millions of people around the world watched on TV. Armstrong said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Between 1969 and 72, 12 U.S. astronauts walked on the moon. They brought back 855 pounds of rocks and soil for scientists to study. What's your step? The Fritz told us, the moon has gravity, but it's much weaker than on Earth. You're going to be much lighter on your feet here than you're at home. From the deck of Miss Frizzle's. The pull of gravity depends on the mass of the planet. Moon or other body in space. Usually, the larger the body, more mass it has. The moon is much smaller than Earth, so it has much less gravity. If you weigh 75 pounds on Earth, you would weigh only 12.5 pounds on the moon. This is better than a trampoline. He jumped easily off the ground, came back down, then bounced up. Soon we are all leaping and laughing. D.A. and Keisha studied a game of leapfrog. "I can leap like a real frog," Keisha said. "I can jump like a cat." Come to think of it, I now weigh about the same as my cat does on Earth. We were having so much fun. I almost forgot the reason we had come here in the first place. "Rocks," I said. "It's time to put Rocco to work." I bent over and set Rocco down, but I didn't see Tim jumping behind me. He came down and knocked me over, and Rocco flew out of my hands. As I fell, I landed on Rocco's remote control and accidentally hit the on button. Oh no. Rocco's rocket fired up and he blasted off into space. "Rocco," I cried. I reached up to grab him, but he zoomed away. I could see his tail wagging, and he went. Poor Rocco, he shot off into the darkness. He could be lost in space forever. What would I do without him? In the end.